The Denver Broncos reached the playoffs during Bo Nix's rookie season. How are they positioned for year two? We're exploring that today on the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast.
You are Locked On NFL Scouting with the Draft Dudes, your daily podcast for NFL and college football scouting. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's better than this? It's guys being dudes here on the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast. We're the Draft Dudes. I'm Joe Marino from Locked On Bills. He's Kyle Krabs from Locked On Dolphins. And we are your NFL experts here with you daily to talk team building across the league on the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast with the Draft Dudes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Want to issue a big thank you, shout out, and welcome to our everydayers. Those of you who never miss a single episode, we appreciate y'all being here very, very much.
Joe, I was going to wish you a happy Joe Tooney contract extension day, but the new Jurassic Park trailer is out, and I wanted to wish you a happy Kyle gets his heart broken by the Jurassic Park franchise once again by expecting a good movie that probably will not be good day to you.
Hasn't there been some new ones of those that have come out?
And they've all been bad. They've all been bad. But this one's got Scarlett Johansson in it, and it looks really good. And it's probably not going to be good, but the trailer just came out, and my blood is pumping this morning.
Wow. Yeah, the Miami, the game of, what is it called? What's that video game? I can't think of it. Miami Vice. What is it called? Grand Theft Auto?
Grand Theft Auto?
Grand Theft Auto.
Yeah, we got GTA 6 coming up next May, probably not. It will probably get pushed back again. And then
the trailer just came out. I saw people were talking about that. Yeah.
Jurassic World Rebirth.
Okay.
Final trailer is out.
Just another way to figure out how to get some dinosaurs involved with some people and see who can come out on top, man.
That's right. And the dinos usually come out on top.
How do you think a Bronco, how many Broncos would it take to beat one Tyrannosaurus Rex?
This is the new 1,000 men versus one gorilla. Is how many Broncos would it take?
It's 100 men, right? 1,000 men is going to handle that gorilla.
Would it? I don't know. I mean,
I think 100's. No, we're not doing this.
I know. Don't do it. Let's not.
I said 30 Joe Marinos. 30 Joe Marinos can handle one gorilla. There's going to be casualties.
Who's the meanest guy on the Broncos?
John Franklin Myers, maybe.
How many John?
No, it's Quinn Miners. What am I crazy? It's Quinn Miners.
How many Quinn Miners would it take? If you had a triple threat tag team of John Franklin Myers, Quinn Miners, and Zach Allen, how many of that triple threat tag team would you need to beat one gorilla?
12. So a total. So four sets. 4 times 3. Yeah, 4 sets. 12 total people.
Okay, got it. All right, we'll see. Well, let's talk about the Denver Broncos as a roster. We are through 5 teams of the 32. We are doing our positional weekly deep dives on each roster, kind of doing the assessment of the roster, looking at players and categorizing them as roster cornerstones, quality starters, sufficient level starters, quality depth players, replacement level players, non-roster caliber players, rookies, incomplete evaluations, and practice squad caliber players. So the Broncos are spotlight today. We're going to go through skill players. Quarterbacks is its own separate thing, which is a good thing because I have some nuance to the Bo Nix conversation that will come when we talk quarterbacks that nobody seems to want to apply nuance to quarterback conversations as a whole. So that's not a today conversation. But looking at skill players, the trenches, and then the back 7 for the Denver Broncos.
This team has some new skill players, man. They've changed their primary guy at running back and tight end. Evan Engram coming in to fill the Joker role for Sean Payton, and RJ Harvey, a draft pick that I think a lot of people are pretty excited about given Sean Payton's history with the running back position, the skill set that Harvey has, the opportunity, right? A very stable offensive line. So that's quite the player I think a lot of people are expecting big production from. And I totally get it. So that's where you've really had some changes here. And then you're looking from a receiver perspective to just build upon some of the foundation that was laid last year, where Cortland Sutton had his best year in a while. Devon Vele in the slot, kind of a big slot, emerged for them as a late round pick in his rookie season. And then there's this Marvin Mims factor where I feel like once again, I find myself saying, let's get him more involved, right? He's a very dynamic playmaker whenever he gets an opportunity, and he's part of this mix in addition to Troy Franklin, who's a bit of a one-trick pony with his vertical receiving skill set. But, you saw some big plays late in the season with him and Bo Nix. Of course, the Oregon connection exists there. And so you got an interesting mix here. They draft Pat Bryant, 3rd round. They'll certainly be counting on him to step into a role. And, Kyle, we got to acknowledge Trent Sherfield. What is this, his 5th team in as many years? And I think he just continues to find the spot that's ideal for him to get some run and get some minutes and continue his legacy as a guy that wasn't drafted but has never spent a day on a practice squad. I think he's going into like year 7 or year 8 or something like that. So quite the career he's been able to stack together.
Cortland Sutton, Pat Bryant, Trent Sherfield, Devon Vele, pretty physical group of receivers there to work with, in addition to Evan Engram as a big receiving tight end. So some size, physicality for Denver, for a team that has a really well-established offensive line that we're going to talk about in just a minute. So I like the outlook. I like the consistency of the theme, and kind of the change of pace guys are the guys that kind of bring some of that shiftiness. But I don't think Denver's left a lot of intrigue or mystery as far as what kind of brand of football do we want to play. They're not a team that's really assembled a small group. And I think that around Bo Nix, you've got potential for some bucket getters. I think you got some guys that can win down the field, in the middle of the field. I think that's really the 2 areas where Bo's really going to prosper, in addition to being able to lean on the run game. So I like what they've done from a stylistic perspective, but I think the ceiling of this room is probably going to be determined by the 2 rookies that they have in the top 100 in Pat Bryant and RJ Harvey.
Does that excite you?
I could see how it would work. That wasn't your question, but that's my answer.
It's got to come together, right? I mean,
part of me doesn't want to like fade Sean Payton, right? Like Sean Payton's a great offensive coach. Like if this is the vision that he had, I would imagine it's probably a formula in which they're going to be able to have another successful season and be more diverse and have more answers than what they did last year, which will be great. And I think it's necessary for Bo to try to evolve himself as a player, right? Because so much of what he did really well was execute the concept of the scheme, which you knew was going to be the case coming out of Oregon.
Yeah, and I think they got better at running back and tight end. I think they're more dynamic at running back for sure with Harvey. Yeah. Harvey is part of the mix, and of course at tight end as well. So if everything's kind of the same, you have some younger players that you'd think would take a step in Mims and Franklin and Vele, and you got more dynamic at tight end and running back. I can see these as really solid incremental steps here to become a more dynamic group around Bo Nix, who I think did a good job of running the offense, but then also when required to lean into some of the mobility, you saw it, man. He was able to extend plays and pick up chunks as a runner. And so I think this weaponry is improved, but it's just a matter of how much we can get out of Harvey and Bryant to really elevate the ceiling and feel like you're super dynamic around Bo Nix.
Right. I think that's a great call out because I would say their skill player moves have unequivocally and comfortably raised the floor of the unit. What name do you point to say we raised the ceiling? Is it Evan Engram? Is it RJ Harvey?
I think you have to point to Harvey.
So, and that's a big bet that you're placing on a second round draft choice at running back who has a very explosive athletic profile. But there's no proof of concept. So that's why for me, like I look at the group and I say one of these young guys is going to have to hit in a big way for me to look at what they have and say, hey, I think they really threw open the ceiling on what they're capable of offensively. But I think they're a lot more even keeled across the board. And that in and of itself will be helpful for Denver when they get into some matchups against some better defenses.
My apologies to Trent Sherfield. It's a 6 team in 6 years.
I'll sell him short now.
Yeah, didn't want to sell him short. All right, we're going to talk about the trenches here on the other side of it. A lot of stability with this offensive line year over year. We'll talk about that and a whole lot more. Be sure to stick with us. The NBA playoffs are in full swing, and every night delivers a highlight-worthy performance. Major momentum shifts and can't-miss moments. Whether it's a game-winning shot or a breakout player, there's never been a better time to get in on the action. And FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game before tip-off and live. With player props, performance trends, and same-game parlays, fans have more ways than ever to play smart and win big. And look, we got the conference finals coming up here on both sides of the equation. It's going to be a good one in the West, man. The Thunder and the Timberwolves. I'm excited, man. I like this Anthony Edwards guy. You watch this guy play, man? I'll be going in on some overs for him for sure. I love the way that guy gets after it. And look, if you have a feel on who's heating up, which teams are heating up, which players are heating up, why not back that up with the same game parlay and make these playoffs even more exciting? And if you're new to FanDuel, it is the perfect time to sign up. Head to FanDuel.com, place your first $5 bet. If it wins, you get $200 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA.
All right, so trench play for Denver. This is a team that's had pretty consistent availability for their unit. They're one of those teams that has been blessed with their guys have been on the field a lot on the offensive side of the ball. Garrett Bowles, Ben Powers, Luke Wattenberg, Quinn Miners, Mike McGlinchey, the projected 1 through 5. And I would say it's a great thing that they have had reliable availability for their 1 through 5 because the depth really doesn't do a lot for me. But maybe some of that's also because some of these guys haven't had a chance to show what they are.
Yeah, man, this offensive line performed well last year. Did a good job of keeping Bo Nix upright and giving him an opportunity to be successful as a rookie. And I look at this group and I see a quality starter in Bowles at left tackle. I see a franchise cornerstone in Quinn Miners at right guard. And I see sufficient level starters in the other 3 spots. And I think Mike McGlinchey may have had one of the better years of his career last season.
I think that's fair.
Yeah, I mean, just kind of some up and down there for a couple of years, and I think he really stabilized. And I'm sure the offensive infrastructure plus the emergence of Quinn Miners has contributed to that. I think when it comes to depth, you're looking at your 2 main players, and from a depth perspective, is Matt Parrott at tackle and Alex Forsyth in the middle. And Forsyth got some minutes last year, and I think that's helpful. But yeah, I think you're the rest of it's a little unproven. Calvin Throckmorton kind of been a disappointment, but what I like about this group is, of course, the starting lineup. I think this is one of the better starting offensive lines in the league, but they're also returning a lot of it. I think their top 8, maybe their top 9 are back from last year. And I think that year-over-year continuity really helps if they do have to lean into the depth in ways that they haven't in recent years.
Yeah. I mean, it's Ben Powers, Quinn Miners took 1088 snaps apiece. Garrett Bowles took 1068. Wattenberg took 824 and Mike McGlinchey took 847. And then you go back to 23. I mean, that Bowles, Powers, Miners, they were all over 1,000 snap. Mike McGlinchey was 946. Obviously, they had Lloyd Cushenberry in 23 versus him leaving to go in free agency to play in Tennessee this past year and suffered an injury. But it's a lot of time on task for that group together. And I agree with you where I think there's some ceiling with these players. I think there's some floor that you feel really good about. If they continue to have that trend of guys available, I expect this to be the strength of the offense as a whole. And that's in part because of the time on task that they shared together, but it's also because I think there's a very high floor across the board with a couple of guys that are needle movers.
Yeah, I think the other thing to mention here is you mentioned Lloyd Cushenberry leaving in free agency, and that was no small loss. And I think a lot of Cushenberry, but I think the Broncos did a pretty good job with Wattenberg stepping in, and even Forsyth, like you mentioned, had to play some snaps there with when Wattenberger missed time. And I thought that transition went fairly well, given neither guy is a high profile replacement, right? It's just someone in the pipeline. And I thought that went pretty well. And I think, you want experience at center, but if you don't have experience at center, have experience everywhere else to insert a young center. And I think that's kind of what happened with the Broncos with, established veterans in the other 4 starting spots.
So that's the offensive line, which we have a glowing review for. Is the defensive line better than the offensive line?
There are things that I love about this mix, and there are things that I have concerns about with this mix.
John Franklin Myers, DJ Jones, Zach Allen, Jonathan Cooper, Nick Bonito, Malcolm Roach, Jonah Ellis, Savion Jones, rookie this year, kind of the marquee names up front. And I believe I had this graded very similarly to you, where Franklin Myers, quality starter, Jonathan Cooper's quality starter, Nick Bonito, quality starter. I mean, that in and of itself, that 1 through 3 on the edge,
Yeah.
you can play and win some football games with that group right there, because you got guys that have explosiveness, you got guys that have bend, you got guys that have heavy hands, you got guys that can set the edge. There's complementary skill sets that exist there.
Even Ellis, man, is like the fourth guy.
Yeah,
pretty strong.
Got a little juice to him.
Pretty strong group. Yeah,
I think Zach Allen's a roster cornerstone player.
Ooh,
I'm really high on Zach Allen, and he can do some stuff playing as a base. Like when you want to go heavy and you go even front, and you want to have like another base end that's not John Franklin Myers, like Zach Allen can play out there and do it.
Well, I have him as a quality starter, so I don't want to.
Why do you hate Zach
There
Allen?
it is. There it is. Why do you love him so much? Well, obviously, I think it's such a unique front that they run, where it's a lot of odd front, but then they'll get up the field a little bit too. Like it's a different type of scheme, and I think Allen really just works here, right? He kind of found his landing spot, and so I like his ability to rush and penetrate and kind of like wreak havoc and cause chaos. I do look at this group collectively, and I know that their run defense, like metrically, wasn't poor, but I felt like when teams were able to really commit to it, they could create some displacement. And I don't see, outside of John Franklin Myers and Cooper, like on the edge, even DJ Jones is a little bit more of a penetration style nose. So I do worry about this team when they really have to like hunker down and deal with physical run teams, how they're able to shake out with that. They really didn't change much with that year over year.
Well, I think Savion Jones can help on the edge with that. I don't know that he'll help in the middle with that. And I think that's, to your point, you'd really like to get another, like John Jenkins just signed in Baltimore, right? Like a name like that added to this mix
be helpful.
I think would be very situational specific helpful. I think it is probably worth acknowledging the addition of Dre Greenlaw and Talanoa Hufanga will help in some regard with what they're able to do, plugging and attacking and triggering downhill, to go with Brandon Jones, who I think is a better run. I know he's a really smart football player, and he's totally back now from that injury that he suffered in 2023. It was 2023 he had the injury. And then 2022 he had the injury, and then 23 he was back and didn't play great, and then he was better this past year in Denver. So I think their back middle will help with some of what you're talking about, but as far as just controlling the point of attack between the tackles, they're banking on creating disruption, and teams that can get plastered to those guys and kind of ride them out and use their momentum against them, I think is to your point where they will be tested this year a little bit.
I love that you call out Greenlaw and Hufanga, because this portion of our conversation is dedicated to the trenches, but I think they're an important piece of that conversation defensively. And one of the things that I said about Cody Barton for them last year, he went to Tennessee, I think, in free agency. Cody Barton to me was just a cleanup player for them, where they want to get up the field, they want to create those negative plays, and then they need people behind that to rally and tackle and clean things up. Boy, oh boy, did you elevate that with Greenlaw and Hufanga, which I think allows you to structurally play defense the way that you want to, even more, because and that's what those guys do, man. They're downhill missiles.
Wow, what a great tease for segment 3.
And we'll talk about them here on the other side of it, in addition to the rest of the back seven. So be sure to stick with us.
I just looked up at the clock and saw that my obviously camera setup's a little bit different. So my camera's here and then my browser's over here, which is why if people are watching on YouTube, you keep seeing me look off to the right. And I saw we were in the 19-minute block, and I said, "Oh, you know what? Let me get this to break before Joe goes too far off on what I think is going to be a really great point about the back seven and the new pieces that exist among it." for Denver.
Man, even Barron, huh?
Yes. Oh, he's just a nickel. He's just watch how well this just a nickel plays in this defense, where Dre Greenlaw, Talanoa Hufanga, Brandon Jones, Jahdae Barron playing in the core, in the middle of that's your middle of the field coverage players, and how they can all simultaneously play the run. Now, there's some durability questions that I think are fair to ask about both Greenlaw and Hufanga, and
Of course.
that's part of how Denver gets those guys on the price points that they did, where I think if those guys didn't have some of the injury issues that they've had in recent years in San Francisco, they're probably priced even higher than what they signed for. And it's not like they signed for small deals.
Right. They still did pretty well for themselves coming off of injuries, right? But I think they are identity pieces, and they definitely had a vision for how they want to play defense, and they've leaned into it with these players. And I think those are upgrades. I think those are other areas on this team where they were able to upgrade. And even Jaquan McMillan's been a pretty good slot player for them, but I respect the BPA selection of Barron, who, I mean, we were talking about him potentially in play for the Raiders in the top 10, and they get him somewhere around pick 20, it seemed like. And so that gives them some options as well. I don't think Barron has to be pigeonholed to the slot. They can utilize some of their other players as an overhang, like a Hufanga or a Jones, like can play in the overhang a little bit. They want to get like a big nickel and then play the matchups with Barron and Moss on the outside. Not to mention the reigning defensive player of the year in Patrick Surtain II, who has emerged as the guy right now in the league at corner, which it's funny to see how that conversation changes so frequently, but the trajectory for Surtain has been so good, and he's such a technician. And I mean, even through some moving parts throughout the rest of the back seven, I think Surtain has continued his ascension, and obviously a well-earned DPOY trophy last year.
I would be remiss if we also didn't mention, just as we're rounding out the back seven as a whole, now might be the time where it can happen for Drew Sanders too, as another linebacker, hybrid type rush player, where he tore his Achilles in March of 24, was activated and played in the last 4 games of the regular season.
Yeah.
Only had a handful of snaps. I think he played 20 total defensive snaps if you include the playoff game. So really was just getting his feet back underneath of him. But that was a player that was a top 100 draft choice. And I bring his name up because obviously you have the Dre Greenlaw presence, but Greenlaw played 40 snaps himself last year with the torn Achilles that he had in the Super Bowl, coming off the sideline, and one of the weirdest injuries I can remember in recent memory. But the depth is, I think, we talked about with the offensive line. We talked about a little bit with the defensive front. I think Denver's one of those teams where if they get the right guys to stay healthy, they could be a really big problem. But I do think I look at this depth chart, and guys like Drew Sanders and potentially like a Chris Abrams-Drain are going to be really important pieces as guys that we don't really know what they are in the event that one of those other guys has to step up. Because we've seen enough of Damari Mathis to kind of get a sense of what he is, and we don't like it, right?
Yeah, we don't like that.
So I would just be remiss to not mention Drew Sanders as I tie this together and say, I see quality starters in Hufanga and Greenlaw and Franklin Myers and Cooper and Benito, and I have cornerstones on Surtain and Zach Allen and sufficient level starters in Singleton and Brandon Jones and Riley Moss. I like the starting lineup, but realistically, you're going to need the depth guys to play, and I think those depth guys are going to be the X factors for Denver, especially in the AFC West, where a lot of these offenses look improved from last season.
I wonder how many units I'll be able to say this for, but I can for the Denver Broncos. That every position on their defense, I have graded the starter as a sufficient level starter
or better.
The exception being Jahdae Barron, who was a top 10 player on my draft board.
Right.
Not a bad place to be. Right?
Yep.
So,
and you had what, 2 total cornerstones for them? Is it Surtain and Quinn Miners were your 2 cornerstones for them?
yeah, and I think you had 3 was out with
I had
Allen, right?
Zach Allen as well. Yeah.
I thought about Bowles.
A couple years ago, probably, right?
Yeah, but I mean, I'm not sure he's any worse. He's been a very consistent player.
I'm
I
just
just think
proud we didn't do the Cortland Sutton debate again this year. It seems like we've debated 3 years running Cortland Sutton quality starter or sufficient level starter.
he had his best year in a while this past season.
Yep.
He's still got those ball skills, man. Well, and do you see anybody else that would be in that conversation for a cornerstone grade? I mean, if Greenlaw becomes Greenlaw
a healthy
again,
Greenlaw for sure.
Yeah.
And I think Hufanga can be a cornerstone caliber impact player.
Yeah.
But I think the durability, Dre Greenlaw had an injury. Talanoa Hufanga has been banged up. I think the durability element with how violently he plays the game is just unfortunately going to be consistently a little prohibitive from him playing consistently, being and relied upon to be available enough for me to say, yeah, I'm going to put him in that bucket, because he's played a full season slate 1 time in 4 years.
Yeah.
Now that year he was a Pro Bowler and first team All-Pro player because he had 4 picks and 100 tackles and played made all the impact. But in his 4 seasons, he's played almost half of his career snaps in 2022, which that's pretty prohibitive for me saying I'm going to vote you to be a cornerstone player.
Big shout out to the New York Jets. You're going to get your 2026 6th round pick coming up in about a year that you acquired for sending this team, John Franklin Myers. Yeah, really, really great job. That was amazing. I'm glad you got that $7 million in cap space, so you could still lose Hassan Reddick and Bryce Huff.
Come on,
that was amazing.
They had to get Devontae Adams under contract.
Yeah, it's just an amazing job. Amazing job.
Great player. I think probably the football sickos appreciate John Franklin Myers because of just the violent physicality he plays the game with. But he's not one of those. His highlight reel is, I don't think, as sexy as Nick Bonito's, but man, just a tone setter up front.
Yeah,
he beats the crap out of offensive linemen.
He's a heck of a player.
He's awesome.
Another shout out. I really like Malcolm Roach as a quality depth player. I mean, he's not going to play a million snaps, but for a very unorthodox body type at like 6'3", 290, for him to be like a legit A-gap presence against the run.
Yeah.
Different kind of cat, man, but unsung player, I think, in the league for a while now, and I want to give him some flowers here on this Broncos conversation.
Well, that's our flowers for the Broncos. And we're going to shift gears tomorrow. We're going to get into the LA Chargers and spotlight their roster before finishing with the Chiefs on Thursday, continuing to work our way through the AFC West. I'm Kyle Krabs. He is Joe Marino. We appreciate you guys, as always, for checking out the show. Make it a great rest of your Tuesday. We'll be back to talk to you all again tomorrow here on Locked On NFL Scouting.